who was the last movie star? It used to be back then, movie stars, true movie star, you wouldn't do a talk show on TV. You would avoid TV like the plague.
Right.
Jack Nicholson, you would never see him on a talk show. He'd do one interview.
That's part of that protection of exclusivity.
There was a mystery to him.
Yeah.
So that when you went to the theater, really what makes a movie star is you don't know too much really about their life.
Yeah.
So you
don't want to
imprint
either.
your own life on them.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's what makes a movie star.
Hello, everybody. I have the privilege today of speaking with actor Dennis Quaid. He flew into Scottsdale to do the show in person. I saw a screening of his new film coming out in August, end of August, Reagan, last year, and thought it was a classic American production. Very much enjoyed it. Speaks of a very significant time in the history of the world, really, the defeat of the communist empire, which is something remarkable and extremely relevant to today again, when the same sorts of ideas are making their reemergence. And so what did we talk about? What are we going to talk about? Well, Dennis's career, the challenge of playing Reagan, the purpose of drama, what would you say? It's calling to us to see the world through the eyes of other people so that we can expand the way that we look at things and we can expand what we can understand. We talk about Hollywood. We talk about the future of the music industry. We talk about political attitudes and how they affect the entertainment world. Join us for all that. So I think it was about a year ago that I was in LA and Mark Joseph showed me an early cut of Reagan. Yeah.
It's changed from then.
Well, I liked it. I'll tell you why I liked it. I liked the fact that the film concentrated on Reagan's activity as an anti-communist.
Yeah,
I thought
warrior.
that, you bet. I thought that was wise. Right?
All of his life.
Yeah, right. All of his life. And so I thought that was extremely interesting. And I thought it was a wise choice to concentrate on that specifically, because that's the right, what would you say?
That's the central story with him as far as pertains to the world. That is
exactly
what he, almost single-handedly, really, because if we'd had another president in there, it would have been business as usual. He defeated communism.
Yeah,
won the Cold War.
He defeated it in its last iteration. It's making a lovely comeback at the moment.
Well, we didn't. He didn't help them.
No, he certainly didn't. No, I agree.
Which is,
yeah, and I thought the film did a very good job of concentrating on what truly was central about his presidency, and I think that is what was central. And it was daring, and as you said, he had committed his whole life to it, and so that was interesting. I also thought the movie was interesting from a narrative perspective because it kind of it was a classic Hollywood movie. Like it harkened back for me, to the kinds of movies that were made in the 1950s and the 1960s. Like it's unabashedly pro-American, but not in a way that hits you over the head. But it doesn't have that kind of cynical bitterness that's characteristic of much of the productions of popular culture really since the 1970s. And so that was nice to see. And it was pleasant to be carried away by a movie that was...
It wasn't like an Oliver, a movie that Oliver would do, like about Nixon.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So how did you get involved in that project and why were you interested in it?
I took a meeting, I think this was like 2017, that I heard these people, they want you to play Reagan. And it was just like, sure, right. Because I didn't think I looked like Reagan, or the only thing we had in common was that we were actors. And so I went and had a meeting with Mark. And so it was a process, because he was my favorite president. I will say
already.
that. Yeah. And I I'd lived through those times and knew what they were. He was the first president. I did vote for Jimmy Carter in 76. Regretted it. But in 1980, I voted for Ronald Reagan. My dad was a huge Reagan fan. And I voted for him and went home. And my roommate at that time from Texas, he said, "Who'd you vote for?" And I said, "Ronald Reagan." And he said, "You are kicked out of the hippies."
Yeah, definitely.
So
that was like, yeah, for sure,
yeah,
man.
that
You're
was
not in the
it.
hippie club
You know,
anymore. So
you're in the
how old were
warmonger
you
group.
how old were you when you voted for Reagan?
I was 26.
26. Okay. So you were old enough to have some sense, but you could have easily still been a hippie. So I wouldn't have voted for Reagan when I was back then. I
Yeah.
was still being too entranced by the blandishments of the left. So why was it that at that time
That I
Reagan
voted
was yeah.
Well, like I said, I had voted for Jimmy Carter about that. And then after, which reminds me very much, those times remind me very much of what's going on today. There's this malaise that Carter had his malaise speech.
Right.
You know, the country had lost confidence in itself. You know, about who we are. We was kind of accepted that we were a nation in decline. You know, it was after Watergate. It was after Vietnam.
The oil crisis.
And
yeah, the hostages.
Jimmy Carter was like, we tried to be and play nice with the Soviets during that time, as far as peace. Jimmy Carter did a great job with in the Middle East with Egypt and Israel, but when it came to the Soviets, it was like we gave away the B-1 bomber for nothing in return. And we kept for nothing in return just to show our goodwill, I guess. And it's the way the real politic works in the world. They were doing the biggest military buildup and they were going into Africa. They were all over the world. They were making great strides into Central America and the like. And Reagan, who had always been, this kind of cold warrior and great communicator, came along and told people to pick yourself up. There's a brighter day ahead. And it was the perfect time for him.
Right. He also had a very stark message, which was that, and very forthright, which was unapologetically that the Soviets were an evil empire.
Yeah.
Which they certainly were. And so he put his finger on that perfectly. And so...
Yeah, that was all by design. He didn't talk to the Soviets for the first 6 years of his presidency because they kept dying on him.
Right. That's right. But they were putting forward like one 90-year-old after another, right?
Yeah.
There was a sequence of them that lasted about 6 months in office.
Right. But up until his presidency, it had been appeasement with the Soviets. I think Kennedy did a really great job of it. Nixon was actually, no matter what you think of him personally, he was probably had the most knowledgeable world affairs president we've ever had. But Carter, he tried to be a nice guy.
He wasn't nice. He was an agreeable person.
In the same way he personally got together Sadat and Reagan, which he did a great job of. But no.
The thing is, being empathic and warm and compassionate, that works real well with people who are honest, decent, and
really, at the local level.
And at the local, that's exactly right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's a within family ethic.
Right.
Right. With the real thugs, it's not the right approach because they just think you're a sheep.
These players on the world scene, they're badasses. And that's one of the attractions that I had for Reagan. At least, he's a badass, but he's my badass.
Yeah. And a principled person.
A principled person.
Right, which was a remarkable thing also to pull off, I would say, in Hollywood, because I'm sure that he was subject to the same temptations that people are generally subject to in Hollywood.
Yes. And I'm sure gave into quite a few of those temptations. He was a human being. But he always picked himself up. He was, his movie career. I think he was disappointed.
Yeah.
In his film career,
yeah.
he was he was a B movie actor.
Yeah.
And, the films were never quite up to what they should be. It's kind of like he could have been John Wayne, but there was already John.
Yeah, right. The niche was occupied.
That was there.
Yeah.
And, that he was married to Jane Wyman, whose career went like this, and his just kind of stayed there. And he became vice president and then president of the Screen Actors Guild.
Yeah.
During that time, because his career was fading, really, and it's there that his real fight against communism started. Even though it was kind of rumored, you got to be crazy, but they really, after the Soviet Union fell, come to find, you go to the archives, come to find out they really were in our unions, and especially in Hollywood, and.
Well, it's
and Reagan actually had physical scars on his back from fights. He got seriously beat up in a brawl at the Union Hall. In fact, from that, and he had scars on his back, and so he didn't like communism. At all.
Yeah. Well, it's easy for us. Well, I think still we're blind to the threat. I mean, I see in all of this university uprising that's occurring now, and all of these bad actors who are protesting constantly in inner cities and setting up encampments and building these like independent cities. There's a stream of thought underneath that's it's very much akin to the Marxist stream. Although
that
it's
stream
metastasized.
is you get into the society, into the unions or whatever it is, you start creating mayhem. And chaos. You put one at this corner, that corner, and then you just start creating this mayhem. And from that, you start confusing people. They feel like they can't do anything about it, and it starts to grow on its own. And Reagan didn't want to expel communists or even the Communist Party. But he's principled in that way because he felt like democracy can handle it. In fact, that's what he testified, at Congress during that time, during the time of the Red Scare and all that.
I guess that's what we're trying to figure out right now, too, whether democracy can handle it.
Democracy can handle it. It really can. What it takes is for people to be informed, be aware, and to it's slow to move, but people got to get involved. And I do feel that pendulum happening in this country now, that people are waking up.
You feel
saying,
that
I've had enough, because it affects them in their house, at their house, in their neighborhoods. Just the structure of and the substructure of society, kind of breaking down, little by little, and where you don't feel safe anymore. You don't. This is not the way I remember it.
So how did you figure that out in your mid-20s? I mean, I would suspect that the milieu you were in was pretty radically progressive, radically liberal. Like, why? How was it that you came to be oriented in that more conservative direction, or particularly in the anti-communist direction?
I'm an independent. I've never been a Republican. I've never been in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. And I've voted both ways all of my life, according to what I thought the country needed at that time. Republicans and Democrats, as they need each other.
Yes.
Yeah. The Republicans need the Democrats because of this social thing that's out there to kind of lead the way. Progressively, we move along as a society, and the Democrats need the Republicans to kind of keep a little governor on that and make sure that we grow the right way, and that that we don't leave behind principles and things that are at the bedrock of who we are. So it's been both ways.
So let's go back to Reagan per se. So you had a meeting, you said, in 2017. and you weren't sure that was a part that was right for you.
Yeah.
I thought when I watched the movie that you embodied Reagan remarkably well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But
facial-
at the time, I got to tell you the truth. What really is like this fear went up my spine.
Oh, okay.
Because he's like one of the most recognizable figures in the world.
Right. It's just a big part to screw up.
Yeah. And, that's, so I was really hesitant about it. And, I also wanted to make sure it was done right and what it was. And, they arranged for me to go up to the library, which I went to. And from there, we went to, I met his son, Michael, as well. And I went to the ranch, and it was when I went up to the ranch, what was the Western White House back then above Santa Barbara, and went up 5 miles to the top of the mountain, 5 miles of the worst road in California. And I can't believe the Queen of England actually tried to go up,
She
that road.
was a tough cookie, that woman.
And you get to the top, and he opens up, and I realized that Reagan was not a rich man, because this place is like, it's nothing special in how special it is. I mean, the house itself was maybe 1,200 square feet. They had a king size bed. Everything was left exactly as they left it, and it's not a place that you can tour. It's it's a private home, and they had a king size bed, but it was 2 single beds that were zip tied together. All of the refrigerator, the stove was GE, because he worked for GE. I'm sure he got a deal on that. And you could tell that he had done all the work there himself, just like the legend had said. But there was a humbleness to it at the same time. But he was not a rich man. He made a lot of people rich. But he was really who he said he was. And that was the thing that really kind of convinced me at the time. And I started thinking, well, we're both actors. We both have a sunny disposition, kind of optimistic about the world. And there's something about him, though, that's
funny with you, that sunny disposition, because you're not a kind of wide-eyed deer in the headlights sort of guy. It's very interesting to see that sunny disposition combined with something more like, what would you say, traditional masculinity, and that's likely what Reagan managed too, right? Because he had enough backbone, obviously, to stand up to the communists in the unions and
trust
on
but verify.
Yeah, right, exactly, and he meant that.
Yeah,
and so, yeah.
But those things, and then there was also in getting into him, because as an actor, what really fascinates me about acting, even more and more so, is what makes people tick, and who are they behind what you think you know. That's what, the motivations go way back. There was something in Reagan that was unknowable, I come to find out, and even those that were close to him would say that I don't even know if Reagan was aware of it, but there was something, the great communicator. There was a very private place in there that you could not breach. I'm sure that Nancy knew what that was, but he was a very, very private person underneath it all.
Yeah, well, I wonder, because of the remarkable role he played, there's something singular about that, right? That, what would you say, integrity and vision that enabled him to see the true nature of the communist threat early, to fight that locally and to learn how to do it, and then to take that battle onto the international stage, right?
Yeah.
To make that the focal point of his presidency.
Yeah, even when it was really not the issue.
Right,
Even when most people were
issue.
over here about that, he was. And that's what makes a great president, is when they can point out, because they have all the info, and they could say, it's here that we need to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And convince people that, of what it is to go in the right direction, remind them of the principles, and not just the issue of the day.
Right. Well, that's something
to get votes.
Right. Exactly. Well, that's something like a prophetic spirit, right? That ability to see the current situation clearly and to see into the future and to put your finger exactly in the right spot. And it isn't the case, generally speaking, that American presidencies are founded on, say, a foreign policy vision, right? Mm-hmm. Foreign policy is important, obviously, but it's usually not central. And it's much easier for a president to default to some fast payoff local issue and to do that continually rather than to fight the battle he fought, which he really fought for decades, right?
Yeah.
Really, literally for decades.
He was the first to say no to the Soviets, but his take was so brilliant, and it was disguised. And because his idea, and it wasn't originally his idea, it was from a lot of reading, research, and just time spent. He thought the answer was to bankrupt the Soviets.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Their economy is minuscule, even today, to what ours is. They had done so much military spending, and they were really, things were so bad over there for the Soviet people. The lines just to get food and this and that. And that
3 hours
he comes up with Star Wars, which didn't really exist. He got the idea from the movie, about lasers, that are going to shoot down missiles in space. It didn't exist. And Russians knew it didn't exist. At least 90%, they knew it didn't exist, but it was that 10% that Reagan made him think about it. He didn't back off of it at all.
Yeah.
And so, that's
a weird blend of fiction and fact.
That really tore them up.
Yeah.
And so they were on this military spending, and finally they just, it just toppled. Mm-hmm. That's really what brought the Soviet Union down.
Yeah, well, that's a remarkable climax to a life spent that originated in local fighting with the communists in the unions in Hollywood. Yeah. So how did you prepare to, how much work did you do, biographical work and so forth? I don't know exactly how you would prepare.
Well, a lot of it, I'd lived through. I'd lived through the times. That had a lot to do with it. And I was a history buff to begin with. So I remember the stuff, but I watched YouTube was really great because you have all of those. You have everything. Uh-huh. You can go back and see. What do you get I work outside in a lot, so I work on the physical. How's a person walk, talk. And then from that, it goes inside, and I realize why that is. For instance, like Reagan had like a crooked smile.
Yeah, right.
It's like,
that's
this
good.
Kind of held like that.
Right.
And there was, and after you do that a while, you realize, well, why is that? And it's because
that's why you looked like him in the movie. That's so cool.
There's some muscles that are deadened in his face.
Yeah.
From what? I don't know, but that's, that leads you to the inside of a person, of where they came from. The way he walked, the way the way a person grooms themselves, the way they, the image they put out. And then there's but really when you get down to that's the outside, and you have all the news stories and stuff, but I talked to a lot of people who knew him personally.
Yeah.
And, and I think that's really where it formed. I didn't want to do an impersonation. That's the thing that scared me more than anything of, doing an impersonation.
What's the difference?
Jordan to 989898 today.
That impersonation is an act, it's like something you'd see on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
It's the getting down to who the person is, the real person, is quite another thing. A personal side. It really humanizes them.
Yeah.
Makes them singular. And I like to get a part of a real person, of which I've played many. I'd like to tell it their story from their point of view.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
yeah, which
not from the outside, but
Right.
what we thought of them, and not
Right.
for me to really. I try not to comment too much. I try to tell it from their point of view.
Okay,
What is it like? The question is, what if me, were this person
yeah.
in this situation?
Right. Well, and that's also what you're transmitting to the audience, right?
Yeah.
That opportunity. So part of the reason that we go to see movies is because by watching the people on screen and by noting their characterization, we can adopt their aim. And as soon as we adopt our emotions orient themselves around aim. And so if you can embody a character's aim,
Intentions, yeah.
exactly. If you can characterize a person's aims, then you can invite the audience to adopt their perspective, right? And that means they can live being Reagan, for example,
Exactly.
in the course of
That's
the movie.
why we go to
right?
the movies.
Absolutely. And so,
Yeah.
okay, so how long did you play Reagan, and what was the effect of that on you? Like, I'm curious, when you embody these characters so deeply, because you're really occupying a different perspective, it has to change you, I would presume.
I find myself never really asking that question. It's something to me. It's about learning about. It's about learning about myself. Yeah, I don't know how to sometimes articulate that. I have learned to just leave the character at the end of the day,
you have.
at the end of the take. In fact, just go do something else.
Right.
Because it's kind of like osmosis. I've already done all the work, and now just let the subconscious work.
Right. So
it.
you can leave it. See, there's one of the things that you learn as a therapist is to, because you're listening to people and you're trying to adopt their perspective. But if you take that home with you, then you can't manage it over time.
Bad things.
Yeah.
And
it's
indeed,
not a good idea.
they have happened to me.
Right.
I learned that when I played Jerry Lee Lewis.
Oh yeah. Well, to tell me about that.
Because I didn't believe that. At the set, to tell you the truth, and
that was Great Balls of Fire.
Yeah, it was Great Balls of Fire. And so, I wound at the end, about 6 months after it came out, or maybe a year. Yeah, I was in rehab. Cocaine school.
I see. And there was a manner in which that was directly attributable to playing that character.
Yeah,
so what did they do? Make you manic? Like what?
I was kind of already I was already kind of along the path, and that just. Jerry Lee Lewis is like everything on steroids.
Right. Yeah, and that's how you played him too. I mean, that's a very high energy character, man.
Yeah, he was the kind of probably what a great pianist and
performer.
Yeah, he was one that I got to hang around. He was on the set just about every day.
Oh yeah.
In fact, when we shot at Memphis, and he was. Over my shoulder going, "You get it wrong, son." After it takes, especially the music stuff. But, he was also very generous. He was one of my piano teachers. I didn't play piano before that, just give me chopsticks. And he was one of my teachers. And, getting that left hand really was the key to Jerry Lee Lewis, because it's a very athletic move of being able to keep that up. And I had a year to prepare for it, and I was on cocaine, so I spent 12 hours a day at the piano, during that time. So that, but it's I still play. I continued afterwards, and
well, that's a good habit you picked.
Yeah, that was the good that came from it, because it was that was a great gift from him, and he could be really so generous of spirit, and then he could be like a 14-year-old schoolyard bully at the same time, And
think Trump's like that?
What?
Think Trump's like that? Because, I've talked to
I-
lots of
you
people
know-
that know him, and they talk about his generosity and his kindness in person.
Yeah.
But he's got that 13-year-old schoolyard bully thing, which also...
Well, that's the bully that's, out there about what he believes. And I think he's very principled down at the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And, but I think he can be bullish. Yeah.
Well, it isn't obvious.
He was in the construction business,
Yeah,
man. You got to
absolutely.
be, be in
I know,
the construction
in
business.
Chicago,
You got to be hard nosed.
That's for sure.
For all that stuff,
Yeah.
because it's like
It's all mafia.
you got to
Yeah,
you
yeah.
got to watch it.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You get taken. So
Yeah. He built a building for a friend of mine
yeah.
in Chicago, like a multi-$100-million building. He brought it in under budget and before scheduled, and that was in Chicago.
Yeah.
And that's, that's...
But he's also he is very sweet. At the same time, he can be that. You look at his kids. He did a great job raising his kids. If you look at it, they themselves are very principled and a great relationship with him.
Yeah.
Like that.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, in a way, you can't say the same thing about Reagan. There was, we try not to be like make a love letter for this, because he was human at the same time. And he didn't have the greatest relationship with his kids.
Was he too preoccupied?
Well, his son, his youngest son, Ron, takes every opportunity he can to talk against them and to really try to tear apart the legacy of his father and his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael and he had they have a good, decent relationship. He and Michael do. And, Patty, it's, I can't speak for any of them really. And I'm sure they all have their personal reasons for that, but he wasn't around much because we're in the studio. He was working for GE. He was always gone. He comes from that generation that, you grew up and you were pretty independent and on your own as a kid, like the way I grew up. My parents, it wasn't like the 90s that were your, helicopter parents or really, the people were living at home till they were 25 and stuff like that. You were, in a lot of cases, you grew up on a farm, you were like 14, 15. It's like you need to go, find your own life.
Well,
and so but anyway, that was the relationship. I think there was a distance there, I think, with his kids.
Yeah, well, it's hard for men to strike a balance between doing what they need to do in the world and being around enough for their family.
Yeah,
now
I struggle with that all the time because I'm always traveling and stuff, and I try to be there as much for my kids. But parental guilt follows you no matter what, and it's just always there, no matter how good a parent or present parent you might be.
So what do you make of his flaws? Like, how would you characterize them? You spent a long time inhabiting his skin. Like, we talked about Reagan as someone who had a long-term vision, who was very committed to it, who was very good at communicating that in a way that was compelling, and who was one of the main players in the devastation of the Soviet Union. Right? I would say him, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and the Pope, and maybe you could throw Lech Walesa in there too as an additional contributor. They're not the only people, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
They were major players, man.
It was like that was in concert, all with the Pope and with Lech Walesa. That was all in concert with the United States.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have been doing what they did if you hadn't had the support from the United States that they had, and but the flaws with Ray, everybody's flawed. I think like early in his movie career, I don't think he believed in himself as so much when he came.
I think that's why he accepted
being an actor.
More second-rate scripts.
Yeah, I think he was just out to work for a living, and it takes you got to be willing to wait for things. At the same time. I mean,
that must be
that's
a
happened in my
difficult thing
career
to get
too.
right.
It's
Man.
like
Well,
I've done stuff for money, and these go,
Yeah,
oh,
right,
I wish I
right.
hadn't done that. But,
Right. Yeah, but you need
luckily
money
I've been
too,
able
you
to get to get through it.
Yeah.
And I also remember like in Iceland when the final meeting with or the meeting with Gorbachev about we were going to like dismantle nuclear weapons, and Gorbachev had said, we'll dismantle all nuclear weapons. Just give up Star Wars.
Yeah.
And Reagan said no.
Yeah, right.
And Star Wars didn't even really exist. And and he'd offered to Gorbachev, we'll share the technology with you so that we both have it. And said to know that. But Reagan said no. And I thought at that time in his presidency, I thought that there's that old codger coming up, that won't bend, and that I didn't think it was finessed the right way. I mean, I wasn't there, but it went down. And then also, I think he delegated a lot, which was kind of a strength in that he was an ad man, as president. He showed us what kind of the presidents, he was the best. Kennedy was also great at it. But as far as representing a president as an ad man, as an image, he was really good at it, but he delegated it a lot. And I think he wasn't maybe like an Iran Contra. He wasn't able to really keep his finger and to really be aware of what was going on. It was delegated, and I don't think he had direct knowledge of it. Once he had said, "Okay, I like these guys," then there's AIDS.
Delegate.
AIDS was another thing that I think he really you can fault him with. He made the wrong decision on AIDS. He really portrayed it from the start as that a punishment from God for the sin of being gay, because it was really recognized as a gay disease, or if you're a drug addict, and he was in that case. I think he was out of touch and missed the boat, on that. But he's still a man of principles. But sometimes people have their faults.
Of course,
there is no perfect.
Well, it's worse than that in some ways.
There's no perfect crime.
Well, also sometimes I learned this from reading Nietzsche. It was the first time I'd really thought about it. That it isn't exactly obvious that someone's faults are clearly distinguishable from their virtues. I mean, you look at Trump, for example.
Right.
He's got that bully aspect, and he's really good at it. Like, he's like the world's best 13-year-old bully. He can nail you with a nickname, and he's so good at
he'll
that.
He'll use what you said and then turn around and make a nickname of it. He'll make fun of handicapped people. It's like there's been so many times where I just want to say, please, just be quiet. Why do you have to go there?
But then, part of that, I can't help but think that part of that is also what makes him intimidating to people like the dictator of North Korea.
Exactly.
And it's so like, how do you, because if he was agreeable like Jimmy Carter was a very nice man by all appearances and by all reputation, but he's not the sort of person that like a real psychopathic leader is going to take seriously. Whereas Trump, and maybe this is also why he could deal with the mafia types in the construction industry in Chicago. It's like, you have to have a touch of, it's like Harry Potter, you have to have a touch of the devil inside you in order to understand what the devil's like. And
even our allies take care of their self-interest first.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't happen to coincide with us, they're still going to look after themselves first. Yeah. And then you have Saddam Hussein, the Ayatollahs, you have, some of you have Putin, you have the Chinese. These people, they're smart. These are really smart people, and they know real politics, and they are ruthless when it comes to their agendas. And these have been going on a lot longer than one president.
Yes, that's
been going.
sure.
These guys are in there for life, and you take a little Kim over there in North Korea. This is like the third generation since of the grandfather, the father, and the son, and they're moving on these things. This is not just talk from them.
Yeah.
You have to take them.
Yeah, well, and it looks to me like you need someone with a certain degree of unpredictability.
As far as it's like, let's all be so understanding and everything. Right. They love that. Yeah, they love that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, this is the problem with a kind of a naive agreeableness, is that trying to get along with people works really well, unless you're dealing with a shark, in which case it doesn't work at all. All you're doing is laying yourself open to be ripped to shreds.
Yeah, and that's the way it's always been. And you're going to make things worse.
Yeah.
If you're trying to avoid war, you're going to create one.
Yeah.
Because there's just going to be this red line that they come closer and closer to. If you keep them over there, I say don't cross that.
Yeah.
But if you keep them, if you don't back up what you say, then they'll take advantage of it.
Yeah, well, I think it's I think Trump accomplished two things that were truly remarkable, and I think very much underappreciated.
ISIS?
Yes, okay, we could throw ISIS in there. I was thinking no wars, and I was thinking the Abraham Accords, because both
Abraham Accords.
He should have got a Nobel.
All this stuff that's happening right now would not be happening if the Abraham Accords had been signed.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's, in a way, that goes way beyond what Carter did. Although what Carter did was incredible, but it was like a real true continuation of that of Saudi Arabia, because
when they
these
were that
countries
close to signing it,
devoted to wiping Israel off the map up until this point.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. This is a little bit.
What was the second thing?
No wars in the Abraham Accords is what I was thinking. Was his fundamental achievements.
Yeah.
Like, those are both major achievements of peace.
Yeah.
Which is not necessary. It's certainly not what anybody would have predicted at the onset of Trump's presidency.
Everybody thought that
he'd be a
Reagan was going to be a warmonger.
Yeah.
He was called that throughout his presidency, no matter what. And it was, especially when he was like saying no to these Soviets. You know, it's like, it's all been don't. They're going to have a war, but that's really what kept us out of war.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, the 80s were they were an intense time. I mean, people were more terrified of nuclear war in the 80s than we're terrified now of climate change.
With good reason, too. I mean, there was at least two incidents where it was like this close.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, they were seconds away from pushing the button. It turned out to be a flock of geese. Or you take the Korean airliner.
Yeah.
That shot down. Those are scary.
Absolutely. So what's it been like? What's been the consequences of your political engagement, maybe your political stance, in relationship to your career in Hollywood?
I am who I am, and like I said, I'm an independent. I really, truly am an independent. I voted for Obama once. I voted for Clinton once. I voted for Ross Perot once. I voted,
right.
So it's. I think while we were doing Reagan, that was we were doing it in 2020, and that was during COVID and stuff, and they tried to cancel me twice.
Tell me about that.
Once was over I was doing a podcast around that time, and I forgot what outlet I was having an interview with. It's right when COVID started happening, and Trump was, in those meetings, on television every day, giving updates about what was happening. Remember those times? And asked me like, how do you think Trump is handling the crisis? I said, well, at least he's there every day. He's, comes out and he's there every day. It may not be, be making, saying the right things or this or that, but he's there every day, and that's reassuring. To see your leaders out there that they're doing something about it, and over that, they were trying to they blew that up into. That was one time, and then while we were doing the film, there was this false story that came out. This was that I had taken like $400,000 from the CDC through Trump to do a commercial for the vaccine or something like that, which was totally false narrative. And how my son was calling me up about like, hey man, you're gonna get canceled over this. It's like people, it was like, and so but I didn't get canceled. But it was untrue to begin with. So,
do you have any idea why you didn't get canceled? Like, did you do something right, or do you like? People get canceled, so why didn't it happen to you when storms kind of?
I don't know. I don't know. I went on Instagram immediately and exposed it. But
right. So there was smoke, but no fire. So that's helpful.
And I don't know. Maybe I'm really on neither side is left and right. I come from a time when you had conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans, and their agendas were not so far apart, really. Mm-hmm. And now it's become this deep, wide valley, and they're about 50-50, so it's hard to get anything done.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, I've spent a fair bit of time in Washington and a lot of time talking to Democrats and Republicans. And I've had more success talking to Republicans, frankly. It's been easier for me to talk to them. And I don't think it's because it's certainly not initially conservative in my orientation, although I think I've become more conservative in some ways. The Democrats, their fundamental sin, as far as I can tell, is that they can't draw a boundary at all between the mainstream Democrats, which are the majority, and the minority of radicals. And
the inmates are controlling the asylum.
Absolutely. Well, and these are exactly the same people, as far as I'm concerned, that Reagan was facing off against in the 1950s in Hollywood. It's exactly the same thing. And I've asked 50 Democrats that I've talked to, when does the left go too far? And I've never got a straight answer from any of them. And that's the God's honest truth, right? It's like, well, obviously the left can go too far, right? I mean, remember the Soviet Union, remember Maoist China. It's like they went too far. When? I asked RFK that. He said, I don't want to have that kind of divisive campaign.
Really brilliant, man. But you asked him what?
Well, I asked him when the left goes too far. And he said, I don't want to run that kind of divisive campaign. It's like, well, the radicals are pulling your party to the left in a major way. And maybe it's time to draw some boundaries. Like for me, I'm not a fan at all of the equity move, the idea of equality of outcome. That's a catastrophic idea. It eliminates individual difference. And why would you do that? Especially if you're interested in diversity. It's like, there can't be equality of outcome if you want people to be different. Like those things don't go together. Right. And you're going to compare people on absolutely every dimension, and you're going to insist on equality.
You're going to wind up handcuffing
everyone,
and basically coddling people to where they can't get ahead because your life's tough for everybody around here. And I definitely, I just totally believe in a safety net for socially. That wasn't originally part of the Constitution, what the government is supposed to provide. But, I definitely do believe in that. But there's some government-sponsored programs that you go back, like Social Security, these things that were meant to help people. You go back to the 19th century, and there was nothing.
Yeah.
You had like, this is where all this stuff started, where you had the Vanderbilts and the Morgans and the Rockefellers and everything. And there was the Carnegie, there was just no checks and balances on wealth. Carnegie was, rivaled the government himself. I mean, you put them all together, they they had more cash than the government did, and there was no checks and balances on that. And a lot of people they wind up then with up here and then down here. And so I think some of the things that came into being, social networks, and the Democrats can't take credit for all of them.
No.
Teddy Roosevelt was very progressive. He was a Republican, and Lincoln, of course, and things. But at the same time, you can go too far about, and what is the point? In the end, it seems to me when it goes too far, it's when it's not about what they're talking about. It's about power.
Yeah.
It's totally just about power.
Yeah.
They don't care if you don't care what you're tearing down.
If you look at the political spectrum, like a distribution between left and right, as you get farther out on the fringes, you get out of the political, I think, entirely, is that you get into the domain of people who are using the political for nothing but power. And they're exactly the psychopaths that we were talking about.
It's the Marxist agenda. Create chaos and move into that,
and
get
do
people
it
used to it.
Yeah, and it's all about compassion, but actually, what it's about is power.
Right.
Yeah, compassion is
I see these
disguise.
The Republicans have done it as well. I wasn't really very proud of the Republican Party back in the 90s in a sense. They played kind of the personal, like the way they were with Clinton, and that it was like they weren't working together like they could have been working together. And it seemed like, to me, like a power move on the Republican
Well,
part back in the 90s. You go into the 80s and into the 90s.
So I just last year I did a seminar on Exodus, on the story of Moses, and Moses is the archetypal leader, and his fundamental temptation and flaw is power. Right? So it's always the case that in the political realm, the temptation is to default to power and to corrupt the enterprise.
Yeah, like with Clinton, he did something which is not a crime, but because he lied about it, then they go into, like, the Republicans pounce, and they impeached him. They impeached him, and that was a play for power. They failed ultimately in that, times were so good. And Clinton also was very good about, 2 years into his presidency, it was like a duck. He wasn't going to make it for the second election because times are bad. And
that turned around.
He was so pragmatic and so smart that he basically absconded the Republican agenda, plopped it down, and went State of the Union speech, said the era of welfare in this country is over, and that's how he won the second election. And he was a very pragmatic person.
Let me return to Hollywood, if you don't mind. It seemed to me that Hollywood took a walloping blow with COVID and then the strike. And like, one of the things I've noticed about myself is I used to go to movies all the time, to theaters. I love going to movies. And I've gone to very few movies since COVID. It's kind of like, I don't know if I got out of the habit. It's something like that. Partly, I used to know where to get reliable reviews for upcoming movies. Like, I was in the stream. I knew what was coming out of Hollywood. I made plans to go see the movies.
Right.
That all disappeared. And now I don't know how to get back to that. But I think—
And you're wondering, is it because of my age?
Must be. Yeah. Well, that
Yeah.
could be too.
Yeah.
Although, see, I don't know.
Or is it just that way?
I also don't know that, and of course the media landscape is fragmented too, and so it's hard to figure out what
Right.
sources you can rely on
I mean,
for
the
information.
way they advertise movies is nowhere near what it used to be.
Yeah,
It used to
right.
be just like an ad in the newspaper.
Yeah, and that
you
was
know,
enough.
Yeah, and then it became like TV ads, and audiences could smell a movie.
Yeah, right.
It was like so surprising. It was just like, I remember for me personally, Breaking Away, when that came out, it was hard. There was no advertising or anything like that. And we were driving to the theater, you go for the, like the opening of it, on that Friday.
Yeah.
And there's a line around the block.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well, people are in the movie
how do they
culture.
know?
Well, that's the thing, is that these things are very fragile, is that we never know what makes a whole enterprise work. And if people are movie fans, they're in the movie culture. They track it. And if you break that, it's like...
that's gone.
Yeah, well, yes. Okay, so you feel that's gone.
You don't see Roger Ebert on television anymore. There was the whole culture that went with it.
Yeah.
That everybody watched. What are the new movies coming up, and laying them out there, what they're about, and all that, and
Yeah.
And
you knew months in advance.
Really, great debates on what they were about, and
So how do you view the current reality and the potential future of the film industry? Are there still stars?
That's the thing. Who was the last movie star?
Well, from what I've been able to understand, the only star truly standing,
Leonardo DiCaprio,
Cruise?
Cruise. That's going too far back. Leo. I mean, the last movies, they're still out there.
Yeah,
they do occur.
Yeah, they're out there, but they also, my sense too is that, and I don't really know what to make of this, that are they the last of a dying breed?
Well, the new is like, it's gone to social media.
Yeah.
That's where the new movie stars are. I mean, Justin Bieber, the first star, totally created on YouTube.
Yeah.
Nowhere near the traditional way
Yeah.
of doing it. And then the actors now are the same way. They have their Instagram page. They self-advertising, and but it used to be back then, movie stars, like in the, going up and really until the 80s, 90s, true movie star, you wouldn't do a talk show on TV. You would avoid TV like the plague.
Right.
Jack Nicholson, you would never see him on a talk show. He'd do one interview in a prestigious magazine, whether it be Time, Playboy,
Right.
whatever it was.
Right.
That's
part of that protection of exclusivity. Yeah.
And you would, some guy would spend a couple of days with him or something, but you really wouldn't. There was a mystery to him.
Yeah.
So that when you went to the theater, really what makes a movie star is you go to the theater, they are a mystery. You don't know too much really about their life. Yeah. So you
don't want to
imprint
either.
your own life on them.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
You see them for something inside you.
Yeah.
And that's what makes a movie star.
Well, you actually don't want to know much about the personal life of an actor.
And now it's like, well, it got to be that you just do everything.
Yeah.
About everybody.
Yeah.
And
that brings them down to earth, and that's not good if you're a star.
Well, it doesn't create mystery.
Yeah, right.
Put it that way.
I wonder, too, how much of it is the fact that, like, when you and I grew up, being on television was, like, that was a remarkable and unlikely occurrence, to be personally on television, even to know someone who was on television. The bandwidth was so narrow.
Yeah.
And then the movies were above that.
Yeah.
Right? It was easier to be on TV than on the movies.
Right.
But now everyone is on TV all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's another borderline between the public and the actor that's disappeared. It's like everybody is videoed from the time they're young.
But there's no going back. I mean, that's the way the world heads.
No.
And good things come out of it. Good thing.
What do you see that's good coming out of it?
Well, for one thing, there's really a broad communication in the zeitgeist. People have taken over their own stories.
Yeah.
And like, you could be like me and choose not to participate very much. I mean, I have an Instagram page, I have a Facebook page, and I didn't grow up with it. So it seems like a real chore to me.
Yeah.
And
Right. It's not your culture.
yeah. And I like face-to-face communication and I like this.
Why?
This is great.
Why do you like this?
It's a real, I feel like I'm, that is one good thing about today as opposed to then, is that you could do an interview like with a magazine and, somebody who was out to do a job on
absolutely,
you. Because they kind of feel like they build you up.
Yeah.
You have this fall and then you have the comeback.
Yeah.
The thing. Yeah. But like with this, it's unfettered.
Yeah.
And I get to represent myself.
Yeah. Well,
in my way.
YouTube's great for that, and podcasts are great for that.
Yeah.
And they really reward unfettered communication. Like the people I've talked to, anybody I've talked to on my YouTube channel who politics or is false, they get slaughtered.
Yeah.
Like if they say
it comes out very quickly. You find out who people are.
Yeah.
You can't hide so much.
Yeah. Well, that's what Joe Rogan told me. He said, you can tell if there's anything to anyone after about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because people who are hollow, they're exhausted, especially in a podcast like Rogan's, which is 3 hours long. It's like there better be some depth to you to get through that conversation in an interesting manner for 3 bloody hours.
They're kind of like, let's see what happens like 30 years from now when, some of this stuff is going to come back to haunt people. I mean, some of the things that I did and thought or whatever, back in my teens, 20s, man, I'm so glad it's not on YouTube.
That's for sure, man. I feel exactly the same way. I can't imagine, I remember most of my adolescence and my adolescent friends as really a nonstop parade of stupid decisions.
Yeah.
Right?
You should be able to make those stupid decisions in private.
Right. That's for sure, man. The last thing I would have wanted was video records of that, right?
Yeah.
And for it to be distributed around the school.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, like it was a difficult enough enterprise trying to negotiate the weird social world of adolescence without having to be absolutely terrified that some goddamn stupid thing you did was going to be permanently instantiated in the minds of everyone in your town. God, I just can't imagine what that would be like. Terrible.
Yeah, and you just can't just move away from it because it's the internet.
Well, that's right.
It's
That's
worldwide.
right. It follows you. Well, that's right. Well, one of the wonderful things about human memory is that we forget.
Yeah.
Right? The remembering, that's not exactly a miracle. Like things happened, and so now you know it. It's like, well, can you forget? Can you put it behind you? Well, not if it's permanently recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's not good. Tell me what you're working on now and what you have in the future. Maybe what you're excited about on the film front?
Well, I've started a production company with my wife and business partner, and make films that I really believe in and that we all believe in, as a company, and kind of based on certain movies in my career, like to me, like Breaking Away, The Right Stuff, The Rookie, The Parent Trap. It's a brand basically, and that I want to do. And part of that, we have a thing, Diamondback, which is a film hopefully we're going to be shooting this year. That very much like a movie from the 70s that I really believe in.
What's the plot of Diamondback?
It's you ever see like Thunderbolt and Lightfoot? Or a great Sam Peckinpah movie. It's like that.
I see.
And it's modern at the same time. It takes place in the 60s. True story. This kid who was in the Marines, stationed in Quantico, gets out of the Marines. His wife died while he was in the Marines, and they wouldn't let him go home. She died of cancer, and he just, he's young and he's just like, it's sort of like, Oswald. He got out. He was a Marine. He got out, and these guys that get out of the military, and they just kind of like ramble around. They're kind of they don't have a path. He wound up robbing a bank. Really smart kid. Wound up robbing a bank. Robbed 2 banks in the same day. same town.
Well, in for a penny, in for a pound.
Went to, and when he was being sentenced, he got caught. It was like in the desert. It was one of these chases through the desert, which is like a modern Western. It's just so fantastic. And he told the judge when he was sentenced that, just give me 20 years because it doesn't matter because I'm going to be getting out. I'm going to break out. And then he did. And then he got caught again. Then he broke out again. And he eventually there was this one cop that was chasing him and who became like a father-son thing. And he got involved with this case. They wound up on like the third time, they shot each other in the desert. And
right, so you got a 60s adventure, you got a Western thing going on.
It's the anti-hero. It's an anti-hero. The rebel hero turned anti-hero role which is very reminiscent of the movies of the 70s.
Are you good at evaluating scripts?
Yeah, I've read enough of them. I know by page 30 will really tell you. I mean, I might be 15. I'll go, where is this going? But by page 30, if it hadn't happened yet, it ain't going to happen. And that's how I choose movies. I read a script, and I am an audience member with a first-time experience.
Can you imagine
of this story? Yeah, I can. Yeah, and it's funny how like every movie I've ever done, it's the script. Yeah, in that description part. But you can certainly elevate it from there. But basically, it's the story. That's what
how many movies
that's what
have
really
you
gets
done?
me is this story.
How many movies have you done?
I think we're getting up towards. I know it's at least 120, but it might be 150. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what percentage of those do you think
are good?
Well, I wasn't exactly.
Or live up to what I thought they would be.
That you're particularly pleased about in retrospect.
Oh, yeah, probably. I'd say maybe 20%.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, maybe 20%. And then there's those ones that are just really close to me. So I have different reasons for loving some of the movies that's different from an audience, because it's like I'll watch myself in a film and I remember it has so much to do with what was going on in my life at the time. You know what I mean?
So in the scientific literature, the best predictor of quality, so let's say the impact of a scientist's work on other scientists, that's a good measure of quality. The best predictor is quantity, right? So there's a real tight relationship. It's very difficult to do anything of note without doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
Right? So you're going to...
That's true.
If you do a lot
of them were taking chances.
Yeah.
You know, some of them more financially was reason motivated.
Yeah.
But try to do things. I've never had any kind of strategy in my career except to try to do as many different types of things as possible.
Right.
Not typecast myself.
Right.
As
a
character,
strategy.
in a genre, and whatever.
That broadens what you're able to do too. Well,
that's my interest. It's like what makes people tick, and what's this?
Right.
Something, the best things are something that really scares you, because fear is
like
a really
Reagan,
great motivator.
Like Reagan, for example.
It's a really great motivator.
When does the movie come out? When does
it comes out August 30th.
Yeah. You excited about it?
I'm really excited about it. Yeah,
it's going to be distributed widely.
We went through a process in the editing of it as well.
Yeah.
That got to a place that I'm really happy with it.
Oh, good.
To tell you the truth. Yeah.
Oh, good. I wonder how much it's changed since the screener I saw last year.
You have this. You have the script. You have the movie you shot. And then you have the movie you edit.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's where it really happens.
That's for sure, man. Yeah. It's something to be able to edit well.
It's where you really get the point of view.
Yeah.
And you point at the story.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right, sir.
Is that it?
That's it for this side. For everybody watching and listening, I'm going to continue this conversation behind the Daily Wire Plus platform for another half an hour, so you could join us there. Is there anything else you want to
There was one other thing that I'm working on, which is the name of the company, our company is Bonnie Dale, by the way. That's my mother's maiden name, or her middle name. And I'm working on Happy Face right now for Paramount. That is, I'm playing a serial killer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Happy Face.
One from Canada, by the way.
Uh-huh. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, we have the best serial killers.
Yeah, you do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you really do. Killed.
That combination of nice and evil, that's a particularly Canadian thing.
Yeah, it's really about, he killed like 8 women over 5 years in the 90s, but yet he was a doting father. And it's really about his relationship. It's really about
who was he?
Her relationship.
What's his name? Do you remember?
Her relationship with her dad.
Jesus.
I won't tell you who it is.
Brutal.
Brutal. Look up Happy Face Killer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So what's it like to inhabit a role like that?
It's so much fun.
You're a bad man. All right, sir.
Keith Jesperson.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So anyways, as I said, everyone, join us on the Daily Wire Plus side. I think I'll walk through Mr. Quaid's autobiography and find out, what set him on a role to be an actor. I'd like to find out about why that's a family affair, because it is with the Quaids, and quite remarkably and successfully. And so there's an interesting story there. So if you're inclined to join us on the Daily Wire Plus side, please feel free to do so. Thank you to the film crew here in Scottsdale for making this possible. Thank you very much for flying in. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how the Reagan film does. Have you run into any distribution problems with it? Is it going to be widely distributed?
No.
No one's resisting that?
No, it's going to be widely. It's going to be, I think, 3,000 or 3,500 theaters.
Oh, great. Well, I wish you all the luck with that. Like I said,
it's not like we shopped it around, all these years. It was just, we kind of waited till we got the film where we wanted, and then shopped it.
It seems with all the agitation on campus and all the politics that's in the air and the upcoming election in November, that August might be a hot time to release it.
Well, one of the things was I didn't want it to come out in an election year. Definitely didn't. And then it's coming out now in an election year, and turns out it's a perfect time for it to come out.
Yeah. Seems like it might be. Like it might be. All right. Say hello to Mr. Johnson for me.
Will do.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening, and sayonara.